idea that by using the medicinal marijuana product that the patient would be totally off of their narcotics. It has happened in a few cases. I've seen that, but for the most part, I think that it's working together. The medications work together, and I just feel like that maybe there needs to be more done to educate the primary care providers that they understand how the product works in conjunction with what the patient is already on. And then I feel like I need to say something. I have several patients who say that the product works so well for them, they wish they could afford to use it more regularly, but they can't because it's just the cost prohibits that. And I know that there's nothing that I'm going to say that's going to address the other concerns that some of the people have about, the teens and so forth. And but I do appreciate that, and I would like to learn more about it. However, I see that in my small area of experience with the use of it in my patients, and their quality of life has just improved immensely. I've seen people go back to work who's been unable to be employed because they have a seizure disorder, and since they've been using the medicinal product, that they've been seizure free for over a year. And I just see some amazing things happen, and I just would like to people be educated, including our patients, that there is a lot of good in this product. I see the drawbacks, I see the pitfalls for some people, and I think if we can all just be better educated, it would be immensely helpful to everyone, providers and our patients. And that's really about all I have to say.
Thank you, Dr. Kleincampbell. That does finish your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
All right, our next public commenter is Laurel Muting. There you are.
Hello?
Laurel. Hello, we
Hi.
can hear you, Laurel. You
Okay.
can begin when you'd like.
Very good. Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. I'm Laurel Muting, a certified prevention specialist. Prevention is certified, credentialed profession in Iowa and many other states. This credential is designed to promote and maintain the integrity and quality of substance abuse and other behavioral health professions. As a certified prevention specialist, we don't have clients, like Maggie said. We serve individuals, families, and communities. We work in schools with youth, in the community with policymakers, employers, employees, law enforcement, faith groups, probation, the judicial system, etc. And our primary goal of our work is to prevent people from having problems with alcohol and drugs. I've spoken with literally thousands of people in my prevention career, and I would be hard-pressed to find someone who I've spoken to who didn't or doesn't know someone who's had a problem with alcohol or some other substance. So much so that the trajectory of that person's life changed because of that alcohol or other substance use. We all know people who have had problems with substance use, and that's why I'm here today. In May of 2017, when the Medical Cannabidiol Act was signed into law, the vision for the program was to help those Iowans suffering from very real and debilitating health conditions. There were strict provisions put into place to prevent rampant abuse of medical cannabidiol in Iowa. This board and its makeup of medical professionals was one of them. However, over the course of 4 short years, we have seen these provisions loosen every year with new legislation and lobbying by the marijuana industry. We've seen expansion of the program with the allowance of vaporizable products. Those were prohibited in the original Medical CBD Act in 2017, a removal of the 3% cap on THC to now no limit on the THC content in each product. And in fact, MedPharm's hottest selling product contains 80% crystallite THC and 400 milligrams of that in one vape cartridge. That's 40 times the standard dose of 10 milligrams of THC. And the latest expansion of the program that we found is a website called prestodoctor.com. According to Presto Doctor, this is a convenient solution where you can get your medical marijuana card online. They offer people to get their recommendation from the comfort of their own home. And by the way, from a doctor you just met over the internet. When we as prevention professionals spoke with you about this push to expand as you were making rules for the program and putting regulations in place, every single person on this board said, we are not interested in legalizing marijuana in Iowa. That won't happen here. We will put strict provisions in place to regulate the industry in our state. However, this is not the case. When you let a for-profit industry that's based on addiction into our state, they will stop at nothing to promote high-potency products and expand use. It's like pushing a snowball down a hill. Once it starts, you can't stop it. As this program moves forward, I urge you to proceed with caution. Your recommendations that you're considering and recommending to the legislature must be based on science, research, and public health on behalf of all Iowans, including our youth and vulnerable populations. And I'm done.
Thank you, Laurel. That does complete your time. Joe?
All right, our next public commenter is Trent Walker.
Well, Trent, your phone is on mute currently. If you could unmute it for us, you can begin when you'd like. Trent, do we have you? Joe, he may be away from his phone. Oh,
Good morning. This is Trent. Can you hear me now?
yep, we have you, Trent. You can begin when you'd like.
Okay. Good morning. I am Trent Walker. I've been in law enforcement for 27 years, and the last 20 of which I have spent on the Southwest Iowa Narcotics Task Force in Council Bluffs. First, thank you for the opportunity to speak today and recognizing the importance of law enforcement's involvement in this program. From a law enforcement perspective, I'd like to comment on just a few things. First, from a qualitative and quantitative standpoint, I wish that you maintain the existing dosages, weights, and percentages. For street officers and detectives and criminologists, continuity in the law is always preferred over having to constantly be briefed in service training and taking up valuable time. Trying to determine what a substance is difficult enough. And now we have to kind of split hairs on identifying percentages of chemicals. Law enforcement is always kind of a black and white area, and that we like to be told, is it or isn't it a controlled substance? Marijuana and THC concentrates remain to be the common denominator in controlled substance use and abuse. In working for narcotics for 20 years, I can say, after having interviewed probably hundreds of people, I would say almost to a person, when asked about their substance use and history, marijuana is first on the list, generally if second to only alcohol and cigarettes, and that use has continued. They oftentimes use it to control or offset effects of other controlled substances. What we're seeing on the streets continues to be mostly plant material, but THC concentrates, including vapes, is becoming prevalent. One big problem that we see is that we no longer have the negative stigma of smoking dope or lighting up a joint. When you can get high by using a vape that oftentimes is purchased over the counter and similar to that in this program, people generally start to accept it. There's almost a generational belief that if I smoked marijuana, I turned out just fine. So if my child or youth does it, I'm sure they will too. And it's a gamble. Not only are they taking on their family member, but an entire generation. One sort of thing that I question is that, and this is a giant if, the people who law enforcement encounter in possession of even user amounts of marijuana or a THC substance, and they're claiming to use it for one or more of the qualifying conditions, why aren't we, or if we do, what are the numbers of seeing them applying for and being granted either the recommendation, the certification, or quote prescription that is needed to join this program? And of the people that I've talked to, adults and youth in possession, virtually no one has ever claimed that they need to use marijuana or THC concentrates for any of the qualifying conditions. It is just to use marijuana or THC. And I have, over the last 20 years, and specifically since 2017, I have never been asked for a referral to a program like this, or have I been asked about other alternatives to counter one of the qualifying conditions.
Thank you, Trent. That does,
Um,
I'll allow you to finish your thought, but that does complete your time.
Thank you. I would just say that after having taught DARE prior to becoming the task force, part of the reason that I was given for the DARE program failing is because it introduced substances to the youth rather than teach abstinence of it. And what are we seeing now more days than ever is the money spent on media and their campaigns to infiltrate the market with other substances with THC other than marijuana plant material. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Trent. Joe?
Thank you, Owen. Our next public commenter is Carl Olson. All right, Carl, you should be able to unmute.
All right. Can you hear me?
We got you, Carl. You can start when you'd like.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am going to repeat what I've been saying over and over again. Chapter 124E, the Medical Cannabidiol Act, encourages people to violate federal drug law. Now, that may be a debatable point, but anyway, it appears that way. Our state has created an exception for Chapter 124E to our state drug law, Chapter 124 and 453B. So why would we not seek a federal exemption? If we're going to carve out a state exemption to our drug law, we need a corresponding federal exemption. And there's an example of this. Cannabis and peyote are both Schedule I controlled substances under both state and federal drug law. Like cannabis, peyote is exempt under our state law when it's used for a specific purpose. But unlike cannabis, peyote is also exempt by federal exemption. So we're missing something here. We need to spell this out to our state legislators, chapter and verse. Chapter 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations, section 1307.03 is the application for federal exemption. Please recommend in the board's annual report that Iowa apply for a federal exemption for Chapter 124E using the process in 21 CFR 1307.03. And I yield the rest of my time, and thank you. Have a great day.
We can move on to the next public commenter, Joe, with Carl yielding his time.
All right, I have 3 more public commenters. If you sent an email about making a public comment, please identify yourself so that I can find you in the list of attendees. Did get an email with, didn't really have a name or a phone number that they're using. And also, Peter Komendowski, you had requested to make a public comment. I don't see you in the list of attendees. So if you joined by phone or used a different name to join, please email that to me and I will identify you and allow you to make a public comment. Our next public commenter is Jason Karimi.
Jason, you can begin when you'd like. Jason? Yeah, we have you, Jason. You can begin when you'd like. Thank you, Jason. You yield the rest of your time. I'll take that as yes. Joe, our next public commenter.
Thanks, Owen. I did have Peter Komendowski had signed up. I'm not able to identify him from the list of attendees, and I did have an email asking to speak from another individual, but I don't see them here in the list of attendees. So for future meetings, if you are going to join in order to holding a virtual meeting, I can identify you by your name. If you join the video conference, I can identify you by the phone number that you use, but you need to send that to me. So that is the last public commenter that I can identify from the list of attendees.
Okay. Well, unless we want to, I'll defer to you, Captain McKelvey. We can see if Peter identifies himself soon. Otherwise, I think we can move on to our recommendations discussion.
I think we'll move on. So reference to public comment period. I want to thank everyone for your information and opinions. We do appreciate you sharing those with us today. For anyone that's joined late, we are going to move the agenda items around just a little bit, and we're going to move item 6 up to the 4th agenda item. So that would be recommendations from the board on the 2021 annual report to the legislature. So Owen and Sarah, I'll let you both take that.
Perfect. And I can kind of intro the discussion, Sarah, and please, with your expertise, chime in at any time. So at this point, this is where we, each year, this is a role of the board to make recommendations to the legislature for program improvement. A lot of the recommendations that are included this year were previously discussed at the August meeting, or at least introduced with a couple new ones. And many of these are recommendations that were made last year, but there was no bill that was run last year during the legislative session. So how this will go is, unless there's any changing of the wording that the board members would like to do, we'll entertain a motion and conduct a roll call vote. And again, we will be able to assemble a small committee of the board that's interested in kind of finessing that final language for the report before it goes to the legislature on January 1st. But with that, I just wanted to see if there was any other further comment on our first recommendation, which was amending the name of the program. I don't need to rehash some of those reasonings. They are in the minutes from the last meeting. This is to, again, reflect the scientific reality now that we have formulations similar to what other medical cannabis programs can make. It was a recommendation that was made previously. So with that, I just wanted to see if there was any board comment on that recommendation. And if not, I think we can simply, Captain McKelvey, you can entertain a motion to make this recommendation as it's written, and we'll do a roll call vote. You are muted, Captain McKelvey.
All right, thank you. Do we have, excuse me, do we have a motion from the board then to approve the first recommendation, amending the name of the program as written?
So moved.
Second.
So we have Dr. Miller and Dr. Richards. Do we have any further discussion on that? Okay, so when I call your name individually, please indicate yes or no if you would like that motion to pass. Dr. Schreck?
Yes.
Dr. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Richards?
Yes.
Dr. Stoken?
Dr. Stoken, I think you cut out there for a second. We can't actually hear you, Dr. Stoken. You can give us a thumbs up, that'll work too. I believe.
Is that a affirmative vote from her?
Yes, it is.
Okay. my vote would also be affirmative. So that first motion would pass from the board.
Sounds good. On the additional dispensaries, again, this is something that was discussed previously. This would be in lieu of the recommendation from last year. I mentioned that we did some research with similar states that had walked away from this due to, licensee feedback on viability, as well as law enforcement concerns with security and compliance. And so I'll just let any board members provide any comment here that they would like. And from there, once again, Captain McKelvey can entertain a motion.
Testing, testing, testing.
We have you, Dr. Stokin.
Okay, great.
Do any of the board members have any further comments on the additional dispensary recommendation?
Fresh my memory because I don't have it in front of me. I apologize. I left it at home. We are recommending that the legislature change the law to allow further dispensaries. I mean, as an option.
Yeah, we would. Yeah, we can finesse that language and exactly how they would like to do it. But Iowa's program is somewhat unique that the actual number of licensed dispensaries is specifically prescribed in the law. So they would need to either put in a different number there, or just give the department authority to license as they see fit or based on demand. There's multiple ways we can go with this. But I think, Sarah, our legislative liaison, there might be further comments on that. Or Sarah, if you have anything you'd want to provide on how we might go about that, just because there's a couple ways we could do it. But just in general, it's just a blanket recommendation that we can finesse from here.
And of course, it would still require the department to do an RFP.
Yeah, we are, by the law, we are required to competitively procure any new facility licenses.
Right.
And while there have been, there's certainly concerns with the program's overall viability. In some ways, I think those are well documented. This just takes quite a bit of time because, again, this has to go through the legislature. It would have to be put into law. We would have to do those RFPs, award those licenses. Facilities would need to be built out. So as I kind of mentioned, I think probably the most realistic timeline for those dispensaries being open is probably the summer of 2023. So even making this recommendation now would still be quite some time.
I would, thinking of a nuance here, what would appeal to me is to have the legislature allow the department to determine how many dispensaries there should be. In other words, not a limit of 5. But allow them some discretion in adding others if and when it looks like there's a market demand and an ability for the market to actually support it. And of course, it would proceed to the RFP. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And that really is largely how most or all other programs handle, adding licenses to their state. It's either, based on demand, rolling cycles. So we could certainly add that language into the actual recommendation, which just says, additional dispensaries and to allow the department the discretion, based on demand or, as we see fit. We could certainly write that in and entertain a motion as such.
The other thing, just really quickly, that I would just interject there is currently the statute requires geographical distribution of those dispensaries around the state. So that might be another thing to kind of think about as you're crafting your motion, whether you want to retain that geographical distribution requirement. I don't know if you have a recommendation or thoughts about that, but that would be the other thing to consider as it relates to the overall number of dispensaries, is that additional requirement, legislative requirement that we have in terms of where they can be located.
Mike? Steve Richards, I've got it in front of me right now, reading what it says. I think it says all this. I mean, what you've written down says additional dispensaries with greater geographic access to medical cannabis products. I think the recommendation covers this all.
We're,
I think,
we're just kind of discussing some of the nuances right now, just so the board is clear. And Owen, do you have any further feedback on that?
No, I was just going to say, I think that's what Sarah's question to the board was if you'd like to retain that, or if it just be, people could choose where they would like, and that geographical distribution may not be necessarily included in how we would award or rank or choose. Because right now we do have to take that into account. So in some ways, you know what I mean, you could have a great application, but if you submit it right next to an existing dispensary, we would obviously have to take that into account. Is kind of how that works currently. So I think it's just to retain that geographical distribution requirement or not.
Just speaking for me, I think the whole reason kind of behind the geographic distribution was to knowing that this stuff cannot be delivered or mailed or whatever, was try to make it more available to Iowans. So I think that's kind of why that came there in the beginning. And I would be in favor of continuing decisions, because it would not make sense to centralize all your dispensaries around one location and disadvantage another. Again, that might go into the determination whether it's going to be feasible, but I think it would be okay to allow IDPH to determine that based on geographic location.
Well, I would agree. It's a problem of accessibility right now.
Yeah, Steve Richards, one of the benefits though of in high use concentration areas, populations, is competition. That's what drives price down most of the time. So in some ways, it's almost counterintuitive, because the Iowa population is so concentrated, okay, in certain areas, that if we did allow more people in those areas, maybe the price would come down.
It is possibility, but Sarah, you can tell me if I'm wrong. But another reason that geographical distribution was so important was because of limited licenses. So depending on how many licenses we may, put RFPs out for, it's still important, but less of a pertinent issue when you only have 5. But I think it's definitely, in one way or another, it's still important to maintain. We obviously want it's well documented that patients are traveling far distances, that there's plenty of areas of the state that you'd have a 2 or more hour drive. So I think it would always be considered by us in whatever route we went to license new dispensaries. So I think in one way or another, I think we can start entertaining a motion to provide additional dispensaries, provide the department the latitude to issue licenses as demand suggests, and to either maintain or not that geographical distribution. I think that's the one item that is being debated. Would you finesse that at all, Sarah?
No, I mean, I think that, there are a couple ways to go about it. It's either retain that, statutory requirement for geographical distribution of dispensaries across the state, or there could be some discretion given to IDPH to determine, to consider, patient access, to consider, where our registered patients live. You could think about a scenario where instead of just geographical distribution, there might be some other factors that the department would consider in determining whether to issue, additional dispensary licenses.
With the knowledge that we'll still be able to craft, a narrative for the legislature for them to consider. Do we want to entertain a motion to add additional dispensaries and provide the department the discretion to add dispensary licenses as we see fit?
Steve Richards, I'm going to move to listen to what Sarah said. That was very good lawyer talk. Nice job.
As always.
Second, the counselor's discussion.
Perfect.
So we have a motion by Dr. Richards and a second by Dr. Schreck, correct? Is there any further discussion? Okay, so again, when I call your name, vote yes or no. Yes is to approve that recommendation. So Dr. Schreck,
Yes.
Dr. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Richards,
Yes.
Dr. Stoken,
Yes.
my vote is also yes, so that motion passes. Owen, go on with number C there.
Sure. So again, just for some historical context, currently veterans are not eligible for a reduced fee that currently is limited to Social Security income, Social Security disability, Medicaid, a couple other items that are less frequently used. So this would, including this in the law itself, I think there can be some discussion on, what that would mean in terms of definitions. But just in general, to allow veterans to be included in the reduced fee option. I'm not sure that this was fairly unanimous at the last meeting, so I'm not sure if there's any discussion the board members would like to have. Otherwise, we can entertain a motion.
There's a tradition of doing so, and I do think most of them require that you be honorably discharged. University of Iowa offers in-state tuition regardless of where you're from if you're an honorably discharged veteran. You can also get a free pork chop on a stick on Veterans Day at the State Fair if you've got veteran on your driver's license. This would just be one more perk, which I would endorse.
Sounds good. I think Captain McKelvey, if there's no other comment, we can begin with a motion.
Okay, do we have a motion then to approve this?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I'm going to put Dr. Miller as the motion and Dr. Schreck with the second. Any further discussion? Okay, so when I call your name, vote yes or no. Yes is to approve the motion. Dr. Schreck,
Yes.
Dr. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Richards,
Yes.
Dr. Stoken,
Yes.
myself is also yes, so that one passes. Owen, number D there.
Perfect. So this was a recommendation that was made last year. Again, I think the context here is well documented. Traditional pharmaceuticals are exempt from sales tax, so there's been board desire to make this program eligible for that also. So if there is no other, we'll open it to the floor for comments, but otherwise we can move forward with this motion.
Is there a motion from the board?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Okay, so I'm going to give Dr. Stoken the motion, and Dr. Richards, was that you with the second?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, so again, yes or no, if you're voting yes, it is to approve this recommendation. Dr. Schreck,
Yes.
Dr. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Richards,
Yes.
Dr. Stoken,
Yes.
myself is also yes. Owen?
Perfect. So this is a new recommendation that was discussed at the last meeting. There was some discussion about including the new disciplines under HF 2589 to participate. You all may have been aware of this, but I wasn't specifically, so I did reach out to our Board of Professional Licensure as well as Board of Nursing just to see if there's any crossover in specialty licensures for those disciplines. There's a couple, but generally speaking, they don't line up with the current board composition and requirements. So this would mean that for either discipline, we would need to create new seats and expand the number. So I just wanted to see if there was any, just with that knowledge specifically, to see if there was any comment. Otherwise, we could open that up for a motion.
Is there a total number of new board seats that are recommended?
So it would just be two. Dr.
Two.
Soker is currently 8 physicians of the required specialties, 1 member of law enforcement. So this would make it, technically an 11-member board. So it'd still be the 8 physicians of those specialties and then a PA and an ARNP.
And nurse practitioner also?
Just the, yes. So just, yeah, so a PA and a advanced
Okay.
registered nurse practitioner.
Okay.
Are there any other comments from the board with finessing this at all, or can Captain McKelvey entertain a motion?
Owen, this is going to be restricting it just to those two.
Correct. Correct. Yep.
I have a concern about chiropractors getting into this. Okay. I don't think it's their bailiwick. They shouldn't be there. So we're not doing that.
Correct. Yeah,
They-
there's no,
They can't certify either, so.
yeah, they can't.
Good.
serve.
They shouldn't.
Yeah, there obviously is that other discipline, podiatrist. You know, I'm not speaking ill of them, but there's, you know, just been a discussion about certainly the scope is limited for their participation. So there wasn't discussion about adding a board seat for them. Both PRNPs or PAs and ARNPs, that was more where the discussion lied.
If I look at the graph right, I think we have about as many paraprofessionals, you know, PAs and ARNPs certifying as we do physicians. I think adding one of each would be have several advantages. One, we get their input. They do have a little bit different perspective, even though they have the same medical rights that physicians do, at least the ARNPs do. We'd also cushion ourselves a little bit more, hopefully, by getting two more members and cushion ourselves on the quorum issue. We've had trouble adding other disciplines. I can see win-win here. I don't really see a downside.
Are there any other comments from board members? I think with that, you can entertain a motion, Captain McKelvey.
Okay, would anyone like to make the motion then to approve this?
I so move.
Okay, Dr. Schreck, is there a second?
Second.
From Dr. Stoken, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, when I call your name, say yes or no if you want to approve this. Dr. Schreck,
Yes.
Dr. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Richards,
Yes.
Dr. Stoken,
Yes.
and myself, my vote is also yes, so that one passes. Owen?
So just as a matter of process, and knowing this is the last opportunity to, you know, formally make any recommendations and vote on them with the board, just opening the floor to anything else that board members would like to add or discuss. And if not, I think we can realistically keep our recommendation list where it is. And again, as I mentioned, there will be the opportunity to appoint a small committee of members to work on some language with us here at the department before that goes over. But just again, as a process formality, opening the floor.
Steve Richards, I don't know if this belongs there, but I want to discuss it. And one of the presenters brought up the online Presto Docs that can now certify these people. That clearly isn't a patient-physician relationship for long term. That's commercialization, exactly like happened with opioids and pill mills and other places like that. Is there any need to recommend that we see this as being a bad thing?
I will leave it to the board for comment. I just know that there's nothing that specifically prohibits, you know, telemedicine. You know, one of the definitions of healthcare practitioner is, you know, anyone that's involved in the diagnosis or treatment. So it's not explicitly prohibited at this point. So I'll just provide that, but I'll leave it to other board members to comment on anything.
Oh, and just a question of clarification then. So if a online or telehealth person would certify a patient, they could also theoretically authorize a waiver on the dosage limit?
Yes, if they are the original provider that certified the patient, they would be able to do that.
Telehealth can cross borders. Do they have to be licensed in Iowa?
Yes, they do have to be licensed in Iowa. That's still the case. And we, like I said, we do we have an interface with the Board of Medicine's license database that we refresh very frequently. So we definitely know if they are licensed in the state. That's one of the things we do prior to application approval.
Of course, you could be licensed in the state and not practicing in the state. I got a Missouri license and a Nebraska license, and I don't practice neither one of them.
That's totally possible. It's just, our requirement is to make sure that they're licensed in Iowa. So we don't, we're not required to do any further verification on their level of degree of practice.
Again, I apologize. I don't have it right in front of me. And I've also confused myself because I've read the Florida enabling legislation in great detail because I have family members down there who got involved in medical marijuana. I've also done the same thing at Utah, even more so. And one of these requires a visit to the office and an examination in the definition of patient care. It also requires that you be involved in ongoing care of the problem for which you are certifying. Does our Iowa law approach that at all? Anything about that?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't require, we really leave that up to, the provider, to manage, and follow the requirements. There's nothing about continuity. I think we're aware, that there are patients that, transfer care over to, some of these doctors. Again, it's not, it's not our place to specifically get involved, in that relationship. It's really at the provider's discretion.
Under the pandemic emergency acts and so forth, it would probably be not an issue anyway, because we're excused from lots of requirements for things we need to do or have been anyway to maintain our license, maintain practice and so forth. I mean, telemedicine has had a huge role here played the last 18 months. I presume that also once you've done this as a telemedicine provider, you can also and will in fact bill the patient, and will you bill their insurance company? I presume that's the case. I don't see.
Yeah, I think there are some of them, that may be able to bill, but I think a lot of it is a fee for service type of situation where you pay for the consultation, and I'm not sure to what degree a lot of billing, to actual, obviously that couldn't really happen, due to federal legality. So a lot of it is just a cash type of payment, not cash, but fee for service.
Well, it's very interesting. I had not heard of this evolution. I know my sister-in-law in Florida, they actually had a physician in the dispensary, and you could get your certification in 5 minutes and make your purchase in another 5 minutes and be out the door.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a couple states. I don't think Florida is the only one that requires a staff position. As we know, there's quite a bit of variability.
What was the name of that organization, just for my own personal curiosity, that was mentioned?
I believe she mentioned Presto Doctor.
Presto Doctor, all right.
As a sidelight from pharmacy liability, Florida was one of the hottest spots, okay, for the opioid pill mills. That may be why they're putting some of their rules and regulations in their law, trying to quote, because they really were bad.
Are there any other comments or questions related to recommendations from the board?
One other statement of this, let's see if it's true. If we've made recommendations in previous years, whether they've been enacted upon or not, I presume there's still recommendations without us necessarily repeating them. I mean, we haven't withdrawn them, we haven't modified them. So I'm assuming that prior recommendations from 1, 2, 3 years ago are still valid, whether we emphasize them or not by repeating them. Would that be a fair interpretation?
Yes, I believe so. It's just, it is it's part of the law to submit a report, so we just we do repopulate them, There's obviously varying legislative agendas depending on what's happening. But again, these are just, it's basically when a bill has been run, right? Essentially everything the board recommends has been taken. So whatever the legislative agenda is just determines if these, get incorporated to anything. So.
Thank you.
Are there any further comments? And we can, if not, again, we'll formalize this between now and Christmas. Seeing none, I think I can give a brief program update, Captain McKelvey.
Okay. Do you want to do the approval of minutes or?
Oh, yes, we'll do that first.
Just to get that out of the way quick. So we're going to go back to item 3, the approval of minutes for the, it's now time to approve minutes from the August 2021 Iowa Medical Cannabidiol Advisory Board meeting. Do we have a motion and a second, considering everyone's had time to read this?
I move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so Dr. Stoken with the motion, Dr. Miller with the second. Any further discussion? So we're going to do this just as a group. If you want to approve the minutes, indicate by saying aye now. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, the motion carries. All right, now, Owen, now it's your turn for the program updates.
Perfect. So I will, let me see here. So can everyone see my screen here?
Mhm.
Perfect. So as usual, I'll give an update on some of the items that have happened since the last meeting. I know, as well as just a data review, especially as we kind of close out the year here. So in terms of the board vacancies, I know this has been an ongoing, issue filling these spots, and I very much appreciate board members making themselves available to meet our quorum minimum that we have. But just as a reminder, we have 4 vacancies: neurology, pediatrics, psychiatry, and gastroenterology. Typo there. And I can let you know that we've been in touch with the governor's office this week. They did conduct 3 interviews for neurology, pediatrics, and psychiatry. Received an update that those went well. Nothing's been finalized yet. And also all of these were recommendations in one way or another from board members, a couple of them that have departed us recently. So I will update you all when I officially get word on that. But we're optimistic that, hopefully by our February meeting, we'll have, closer to a full board. So just as we again close out the year, just some of those higher level items from the data, we've seen a 24% increase in patient population if we go back to this time last year. So again, we've spoken to the maybe some of the anemic data in renewal rates, but we continue to see overall that. Oh, this is about providers. So my apologies. So with providers, we've continued to see new ones participate. Again, this is largely due to ARNPs and PAs, but we continue to see new providers participate. The board has always requested that THC waiver data, again, as it relates to the patient population, as that continues to go up, so do the number of waivers go up. But again, we've seen that essentially stay about the same. So even though, there was the mention of potentially some of these telehealth providers, that is not impacting the overall number of waivers as it relates to the patient population. So in terms of patient adoption, and I even can tell you, since we recently, just the other day, surpassed 8,000 patients. So this data was pulled towards the beginning of November. But we continue to see some of our higher new patient numbers. If we go back to this time last year, that's a 44% increase. At this time last year, we were about 4,500 patients. Now we're close to 8,000. So continue to see new patients. And again, this is active patients within the population. So you can, I mean, if you think back, to last year or the year before, we were processing, 100 or, between 100 and 200 applications. And in the month of October, we did 750. So the volume continues to, just stair step up. The dispensary sales, during the first 10 months of 2021, we've done almost $5 million in sales as a program. If we go back to the cumulative number of sales that dispensaries were doing monthly last year, that's quite a bit of an increase. Again, this is largely due to some of those, new formulations and products afforded by HF 2589. But also keep in mind that in the middle of 2020, we lost 2 dispensaries, obviously. So a lot of this uptick from last month is due to the opening in Iowa City. So this is just high level. I just provide a general update. There was comment on, those new product formulations. So I went back to the data from last year at this time, so you can see, what it looked like in terms of formulation, and the form the patients were purchasing. We can see that certainly vaporizers and the higher THC formulations has continued to grab market share there. So again, this is 12 months ago to today. Just about those new dispensaries, I think we kind of indicated how this is, this definitely takes time. But Iowa City opened up in October. I know the other dispensary is still figuring a couple things out, but they should be open very shortly. So we've seen patient numbers increase in some of these areas, increase in calls. And as you saw from the last chart, increase in sales as, we now are technically fully licensed on the dispensary side of things. I mentioned that I would give the board some updates on the committee, the Special Cannabis Committee on Medical Use and Research. At this point, that enrollment continues to grow. We have representation from almost every medical program in the country at this point. We also have representatives from Canada, which is very helpful to get a frame of reference there, as they've built a federal both medical program and adult use program. One of the first items of business that we've done is kind of look to create a white paper on the pillars of medical programs, whether that's improving, maintaining, if your state, is deciding to implement adult use, or even just improving. So I can, I guess some of these items, we're looking obviously at the patient-provider relationship, how information flows back to them. A lot of discussion about that. Medical product standards. So questions about should the standards of products that are deemed, medical, should they have higher label requirements, additives, et cetera, over and above what adult use requires. There's a great deal of interest in the pathway. I've mentioned a couple of those federal bills where FDA is cited. So there's plenty of curiosity about what that pathway may look like. Equity access for patients, certainly how they're prioritized as, all of this industry essentially got started for them. And definitely the biggest item, right, are standardized surveys and observational studies, how we can standardize this across the country. It's very fragmented in terms of the data gathering. Regulations alone, is one thing, but there's certain states that have these robust infrastructures for research or survey gathering. Everyone's doing it differently. But obviously it's really hard to pull out what's real when everyone's doing it differently. So there's a lot of effort there. I provided you some information on collaborating with some of those federal agencies that are now fairly engaged. They're states are the ones that have done this, so they're really interested in hearing our point of view on how they should go about this. So there's some exciting things happening there. And just as a current event that I provided you all, I did provide an update on the first cannabis legalization bill that was introduced this summer. That was a Democrat-led bill by Senators Schumer, Wyden, and Booker. But just Tuesday, there was a decriminalization bill introduced by the GOP called the States Reform Act. That's Representative Nancy Mace out of South Carolina. So it has some of the similar structures, but doesn't explicitly legalize cannabis, but it does decriminalize it. then allows states to choose whether or not they would like to continue to prohibit or regulate cannabis. And then one of the other items is it specifically cites the maintenance of current state medical programs. I think that definitely was somewhat of a concern with the CAOA from some states that may not necessarily want to adopt an adult use framework, was what happens now to my medical program. So just more context and awareness for the board that they're now up in the right.
Well, Steve Richards, nice job. This was due a long time ago, and I congratulate you on being part of this driving force, making it work.
No, I appreciate it. I think, Sarah can tell you, Joe can tell you, I really think we would have loved to have this network 3 to 4 years ago. The regulatory community has come a long way in working together, crossing jurisdictions, trying to find some way, to reduce fragmentation where we can. So we've certainly seen a lot of value from experienced programs and just conversations. Again, a lot of the reason for the fragmentation is that all these conversations and rule writing and regulations happen in a vacuum, and now that's not really happening anymore. You have a lot of help if you're a state that's looking to implement either medical or adult use. There's a lot of good people out there that are willing to help and provide their lessons learned. So it's been great. I appreciate it, Dr. Richards. So I'll continue. Again, this is one of our first kind of projects, but I'll keep the board updated on that. So I guess with that, as we've completed our recommendations discussion, just if there's any questions on anything that we've discussed from the board, anything at all, happy to answer some questions.
Just a comment. Way back, there was medical use and recreational use. And somewhere along the way, the term adult use got introduced. At the time, I thought that was introduced by industry for obvious reasons, but that seems to be the preferred term. Is that true?
Yeah, I think, if you ask me what the logic is there, recreational does, it's a blanket term. It could potentially be seen as appealing to youth versus that's not, what these programs are designed to do. It's legal for adults, over the age of 21. So that's why the term adult use is more prevalent and has been adopted now. It's just an optics and insinuation type of thing. Are there any other comments or questions from the board? Seeing as none, I think Captain McKelvey, we can move on.
Okay. Item 7, future meetings, basically to be decided, correct?
Yeah.
Owens? We don't have any dates set for next year.
Yeah, and I can, I think just, the question around that, is just, any interest in moving back to an in-person format. I don't necessarily think that's, that's a conversation. I think, Sarah, tell me if I'm wrong, that we can have offline. So other, depending on how that goes, I will look to either, coordinate with the board on, some proposed dates or, reach out to DMAC about anything. But again, I think that's something that's a conversation that's fair to have offline. But if the board would want to provide any comment on how they'd like to move forward with meetings, we can.
Assuming we get 3 new members, I think it would be very beneficial to have their first meeting in person. It's just a whole world of different experience compared to online.
Yep.
And for a new board member to appear in person and be part of it and see who's there and interact, I think would be very, very helpful. Whether we continue with that is a separate issue, but I would certainly encourage that the first meeting for new members be an in-person meeting.
Are there any other comments from board members on that? And if so, I can certainly work on coordinating with the personnel at DMAC about locking down an in-person date in February.
And the other thing is, if it turns out 3 of our members are from Eastern Iowa, the university or otherwise, are we locked into meeting at DMAC? Could we travel like the Supreme Court does and the Board of Regents do? Is that
Yeah,
enough?
actually, there's nothing that requires us to be in a specific place. I just think early on, that was the place that was pegged. I'm not even sure if, I'm sure there's plenty of places that the department has meetings, but that can also be up for discussion.
I think it's a great idea. It can help open up the availability for increased public comment from areas that we haven't heard from.
And some of our members have been doing a lot of driving early on, as we could flush people out of central Iowa for a while. That wouldn't be all bad either.
Yeah.
Come up here to northern
I
Iowa.
think I can send a note.
How about a meeting at Okoboji in the summer?
All right, there you go.
Great idea.
Or Texas.
Well, I can, I think those are great ideas. I think that's a conversation we can have online. There's no, reason we can't. But I think that's a good idea for our new board members. If there's no further comment, I think Captain McKelvey, we can move on.
Okay. We're at the end of the agenda here to adjournment. Are there any further comments from any of our board members? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move.
I'm sorry, who was it?
Steve Richards.
Steve Richards, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Dr. Miller, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. We're gonna officially adjourn the meeting at 11:23 a.m. Thank you all.
Perfect.
Great.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you everybody for
Happy Thanksgiving.
yeah, thank you everybody for a great year. Everyone who participates and continues to provide comment, and we'll have a final report towards the end of December and off to the legislature in January. And thank you everyone for a great 2021. We'll leave you all with that. Have a good one, everybody.
Good
Thank
to
you.
see you all again.